Thank you, Eric. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today with you all. Steve is my brother from another mother. Stuart, I'll go ahead and call you my sister from another mister. All right, so as you can tell, there's several certification programs represented up here and systems. And what I might can say from my viewpoint on it is it's just like anything else in the marketplace. It's good to have competition, right? We are a lot more alike than different. However, we do have certain components of these systems that differentiate themselves from each other. So I want to delve into a little bit of that today, but overall just give you a broad overview of Sustainable Forestry Initiative. So I'm the program coordinator in Georgia. I've been at it for about 5 or 6 months now. I took a little detour of 20 years, worked all over the South, and made my way back home to Georgia. And I can tell you, it's good to be back in the #1 forestry state. And I've learned a lesson from you all today. If I have any continuing education or meeting arrangements, I'm going to title it with something of the aspect of fire, because everybody shows up. Y'all like moths to a flame. Holy cow. Yeah, this is great. This is wonderful. It's good to come back home and see this type of involvement in the evolution of this council and this program. It's a delight. So I'm glad to be here. So I have multiple logos in front of my name, but ultimately I work for the University of Georgia there at the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources as a program coordinator. But underneath that umbrella, we administer the Master Timber Harvester program, which is very important and critical to the success of the SFI program in Georgia, because in that standard, one of the many elements, objectives, and whatnot leads to professionalism in logging, and making sure we have a good, robust training program that pushes that continual improvement throughout the supply chain. And that holds true for a lot of the other aspects of the standard as well, but that's one program that we manage there. And then I'm also the coordinator and lead for the State Implementation Committee in Georgia. And what I can say about that is there's a lot of bosses I answer to, but ultimately we're able to achieve a lot. And, localized solutions brings about, good efforts and actions on a localized level that's catered to a state. And I'm a big believer that states are just small laboratories. We're all experimenting in our own way, maybe minute differences in culture and whatnot, and diversity that makes that up. But ultimately, those best practices float to the top, right? So Georgia has their own implementation committee, as well as just about every other state in the South, with the exception of a few where they don't grow trees, right? So of those companies that help support, be it in kind or monetarily, to this implementation committee, I've got them listed there. There's approximately 25 right now. Some of those names you might recognize. There's probably products on your shelf that carries those names. Others are the producers and manufacturers of products that may carry a certain moniker on the shelf. And then we have supporting organizations as well. We couldn't do it without them. And many of those representatives are in the room, and we appreciate that, because we do believe iron sharpens iron. And then at the SFI national level, we have a whole host of partners there. Yeah, I feel like NASCAR. I've got sponsors all over the uniform. But there's a lot of logos there, and we appreciate each and every one of them, spanning from academia to NGOs to other nonprofits that are promoting various things throughout the forestry sector. So where do we all reside? Where do we stand? Sure, I'm keeping up with my time here. We're in that golden triangle, that trifecta of environmental, social, and economic. And most of us understand the social license to operate. And that's where sustainability comes in, right dead in the middle, balancing those three aspects, those three legs of the stool. And I'm a firm believer that stool is not going to stand if it's not sitting on firm ground, firm foundation, and that's good forest management. And that's what SFI promotes. Not going to dig into these standards in great detail, but there's a whole host of them. I guess in the forefront would be the forest management standard, in which many of those certified organizations you saw listed, or all of them, are certified to. And then you have the fiber sourcing standard, and that kind of covers the gap in between, because forest management certification is not right for every landowner. I wish it was, but it just doesn't fit for everybody. So there's got to be a way in order to conduct that risk assessment to ensure that fiber is coming from sources that are conducting good forest management. And of course, that gives then a conduit and pathway for these certified organizations to reach out there to do their best to promote that throughout the supply chain and get everyone in the information flow. It's a great extension project, right? But then there's also pathways and capability for small landowners to participate in SFI certification as well. But I don't want to ignore Steve and Frank Green and gang. SFI recognizes tree farm fiber through their chain of custody, so that label can end up on a product. And you can look in your mailbox probably any given day of the week and find an envelope or something that's labeled with SFI, as well as many packaging products and boxes that arrive on your front porch. So focus a little more just on prescribed fire and fire resilience. It's been in the DNA at SFI from the beginning to integrate that into their standard for participants to comply with that component. And the coordination on the SFI standard requirements include a lot of different aspects, but biological diversity, climate change, fire research, training, education, community involvement. And then at the last but not least, the carrot has to have a stick called inconsistent practices, which is a way for us to respond to complaints that may come through the supply chain. But I will say this about all of them, just to sum it up and a key take home for you. Biological diversity, climate change, climate smart forestry as it is coined, and fire resilience, paramount to all of that is prescribed fire. It is the tool. When you look at the risk assessment across a landscape on how to promote and conserve biological diversity, it's fire on the landscape. That is the best tool to use. There's a whole host of others, but when you want to mitigate things like effects of climate change, it's managing fuel load, right? And if you want fire resilience, God forbid you have a bad fire season, then you're going to also want to have those plans in place as well. So those are firmly footed in the SFI standard, which are then in turn audited to for those landowners that participate. And last but not least, the research, training, and education. The implementation committee is that aggregate, that conduit of funding, which then they can partner with various organizations, be it an NGO or academia and others, to conduct research to help us justify those actions in the forest, or hopefully discover some new ones that would help. So in fire resilience and awareness, the performance measured, particularly in the SFI standard, addresses limit susceptibility to undesirable impacts, promote health and resilient forest conditions through management techniques, actions, and policies, and promote forest restoration of forest following wildfire damage. So there's always the time after the destruction, and you got to rebound from that. So those have to be integrated in your forest management plan. So why does it matter? Well, those undesirable impacts of wildfire threaten a whole host of things, but public safety, human health, property, all the subjects we've been covering today. And in the SFI standard, those requirements have to be deployed on lands that are owned and managed. And when I say deployed, they have to be verified via a third-party audit, somebody that's unaffiliated with that company and their day-to-day business and activities. So they're quite objective when they roll in there to check it out. And then the community engagement efforts. Another reason I'm here today and glad I was invited was to build those relationships with your neighbors and your cohorts and other contacts in order to promote these practices and minimize the undesirable effects of wildfire impacts. So certified acres in Georgia, you may have remembered me saying it's not right for everybody. Well, only about 15% of our forest land in Georgia is SFI certified or certified in general. That's a little under 1 million acres approximately across the state. So 85% of it remains uncertified. In other words, not been through an audit. So our wonderful partners there at UGA did a study back in 2017 looking at fiber sourcing certified facilities. So that's the stopgap measure essentially. And you're looking at a 40 to 50 mile radius around the map there. And there is great coverage across the state. Now, what does that mean to a landowner? Well, being SFI certified or maybe to another system would be that access to market potentially. Hopefully some other incentives would come to that, but that company is then able to label that product as coming from and originating from good forest management practices. So we got pretty good coverage here. We got an alleyway up to the north that's kind of empty there, but I could explain that on the sidebar conversation. I'm gonna blow by this one just for the sake of time. But talking about research and outreach, we partner with companies like NCASI, National Council for Air and Stream Improvement, to conduct various research to answer those questions and prove those hypotheses about the effects of wildfire and prescribed fire. Here's another example of some outreach efforts that we do. Some of you in here may receive a mailer periodically. If you have harvested recently, conducted some prescribed fire on your property, or a change in land ownership, we want to make sure we're getting those folks in the information flow and hand them out or deliver to them pamphlets like this, which I have many in hand. Anybody would like one? And it's just a brochure explaining the certification program and the various elements that we're promoting. A little bit of distribution across the state and country there as far as those outreach efforts. And then all the other aspects that SFI addresses. One is a carbon storage calculator, which they deployed a little while back. A lot of these projects, research and outreach efforts are funded by SFI community grants. So even if they're not aware of those, please reach out to me and let me know. Our implementation committee has had 2 or 3 of them over the last 10 years in order to conduct these activities, and they very well could be awarded to NGOs and other groups. I've taken up way too much time, but thank you.